I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I'm in the process of doing a snow dyeing project on a t-shirt. And as I'm watching the dyes go through the shirt and seeing how powdery my snow is today, I thought, you know what? It's been a long time since I've done this on yarn, and so we're gonna go for it and do snow dyeing on some yarn. But before I go and show you the colors I'm planning today, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to my lab partner, Lene. Lene, happy birthday! And thank you so much for being my lab partner of today's episode of Dyepot Weekly. Now, at the request of our birthday lab partner, I'm going to be playing primarily with Pistachio today. And it is going to give us two purposes. One, as a player in the snow dyeing game, and two, as the potential color to over dye everything in the end. Rebecca, what are you talking about? The yarn we're going to dye today is Knit Picks Swish DK yarn. This yarn is 100% Superwash merino wool. And now historically, snow and ice dyeing on superwash yarns end up with a lot of color coverage not happening all over the yarn. This is because the colors tend to strike the yarn a little bit faster than it might on some other yarn bases and not going all the way through. And so therefore, depending on the coverage that we end up with from the snow dyeing, we can have a fair amount of white left behind on here. And so that's when I will go ahead and over dye everything in some pistachio. So then, yeah, we'll have some pistachio and pistachio, but also a few other colors mixed with it. And I think that that could be really pretty. But you never know. We might get enough coverage on here that I don't feel the need to over dye it. But it's nice to have an idea of where I want to go, right? And those other colors we're going to bring in today are some sea spray, some sage leaf, and a little bit of some pecan brown. Now, I did not pre-soak the yarn we're going to be dyeing today. Historically, Swish DK is a very absorbent yarn, and part of my thought process is that maybe like some of the dye that we add, like as the snow melts, it'll probably sink in right where it's placed, but maybe it'll roll and go in some other spots on the yarn. I don't know. I don't know if this is a mistake or not, but I don't think have I ever tried doing snow dyeing starting with dry yarn. And now as I'm about to set this up, I feel like it's a mistake. And here's why, and why I'm now gonna go wet the yarn. See how much space this yarn is taking up here in the container? It is so fluffy and taking up so much more space than a t-shirt that there's not a lot of space for me to add snow. And so my plan is to wet this yarn. I'm still not planning to add acid to it though. A lot of other times I've done snow or ice dyeing, I've either pre-soaked our yarn with acid or I have applied citric acid powder on top of everything. But my hope is that by not adding acid, and my tap water is slightly acidic, colors do strike to yarn without additional acid. But my hope is that this maybe will let the dyes go through multiple layers, but also maybe not. But now at least our yarn, with it wet, maybe the colors will wick through the yarn more, I don't know. Or they may stick sort of right as they've been placed. It is really hard to predict exactly what's going to happen. But let me go outside and gather up some snow. But just to showcase, this is an area where my dog has not been, and it has started to snow again right now. Eek! It is only the day after I collected snow in that hole for my other videos. It's snowing right now. So I'm just gonna go to a new area where there are no animal tracks or anything. Oh goody, the snow is still very powdery. And you can hear, oh my gosh, a plow coming through. That is quite loud. All right, the snow is still pretty dry and powdery. I will even this out once I get inside. Everything I'm using is dedicated for dyeing yarn though. The other thing that is a bit different here today, as I spread this out a little bit, making it flat-ish, you could see how dry snow is, but it's cold. Is that in the past when I've done snow dyeing, I've elevated the yarn so that way it won't sort of be stuck with all the melt. So I haven't done it in a shoebox before, and so I'm excited and intrigued to see how this will work out. But now I'm gonna go put on my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves, and we're gonna start applying our dye before things start melting. Unfortunately, the one thing I don't have today with me is a yarn mop to soak up extra dye off of my fingertips. But the first thing I'm gonna do is take the pistachio, and I'm very lightly sprinkling it on all over. Unlike a project where you're using fiber reactive dyes and cotton, you're gonna want to be a little bit more sparing when it comes to dye powder for snow or ice dyeing. At least a little bit. Okay, and you can see our pistachio color here on, I probably could have done with a yarn mop. I was like, oh, I'm only gonna go into each color one time. A yarn mop is a skein of yarn I use that I use and get extra color out. But I'm now bringing in some sea spray. So I'm sort of going across in two spots. Oh, I really regret not having a yarn mop. It is the most blue of all the colors we have today. I am making sure my fingers are dry and clean before going into the next colors. The next color I am grabbing is Sage Leaf, which I suppose I didn't really think about how I was going to pattern this, but we'll add a little bit of it to those ends as well. Sage Leaf is sort of like pistachio, and then like it's more of a yellow green. All of these are colors that would look really nice with pistachio over it. Okay, and now for the pecan brown. This is probably the most pigmented of all the colors that I am using today. And I'm really using it as a little bit of an accent, trying not to use too much of it. It's funny, because while this is like speckling, it's also not like speckling. And you can just see how dark that color is. Oh, man, the palette of all these colors is so pretty together. Oh my goodness. Now, these colors are soaking in pretty quickly, enough that like I'm not super stressed about the amount of powder. But the contrast between what I'm seeing here and what I saw of the tie-dye t-shirt with the like vast amount of dye added there is pretty staggering. Gosh, have I done snow dyeing with acid dyes before? I don't think so, because I worried about the exposure and the powder and not being able to cover things, and realizing, so I'll be able to pop a lid on, realizing how things go. But okay, this is kind of time zero right now, but I'm gonna go ahead and cover everything and come back in 30 minutes to see what's happening. And I'm not gonna move the camera. I know I said we were gonna wait 30 minutes, but like at least on the sides, it looks like a lot of color is happening after just 1 minute from when I set the timer. All right, it has been 30 minutes. Ooh, we're looking very yellow. Very, very yellow. A lot of these colors are colors that break, including the pistachio. I am so curious to see what's gonna happen. What I can say looking at the sides, which I'll show you in a moment, is that like a snow cone, the colors have sunk down pretty far, but we're starting also to come into contact with the yarn. And I see it in two spots. One of these spots is right here, which is a little hard to tell through from the angle. But right here, I see some yarn with a little bit of brown. Right here, I see some yarn getting a little bit of green or blue. Here on the other side, you can see how the color is going down through the snow, and then a little spot of blue where the dye is just coming into contact with the yarn. Now, with no acid present, will the dyes go through multiple layers, or is it pretty much going to just stay on the very surface of what is exposed? That, my friends, is hard to know. We don't know what's going to happen. But I do see what looks like when the dye is coming into contact with the yarn, it does seem like the dye is traveling down at least a strand a bit from the way things are looking. And so, oh gosh, we'll just have to be patient. And it's probably going to take a couple of hours. I may end up moving this so that way I can have access to my counter again. But, oh gosh, I'm so curious to see what's going to happen. Okay, I will check back in after a couple of hours. It is almost 2 o'clock. Ooh, and the snow is getting smaller. It's starting to like shrink in. It's sort of sticking to itself. I see some water down along the bottom maybe. Oh, it's cold. And I'm not seeing a ton of color moving down. I think that the color is going to be really deposited onto the top of the yarn. I think that my attempt, even without using any acid, may not be working. See, now that you can see the side, we definitely have color on the surface, but there is so much white. So much white left that this is why my backup plan is that we're going to overdye the whole thing in pistachio and have some fun other color on here from the snow. I think that this whole technique would work way better if I was doing it with non-superwash yarn. And in fact, maybe that's a project I have to go ahead and do soon. But anyway, cover her back up and we'll just keep being patient and waiting. 4:48 p.m. and we can really see what's happening. As the snow is shrinking more and more, we have a beautiful layer of color here. I just don't think it's gone very far into the yarn. There's also, I can feel and see a fair amount of water near the bottom, but again, I think the color is pretty much staying where it's been put. I think at this stage, I am going to set it aside and let the snow finish melting overnight. That way I can transition my kitchen from a dye kitchen back into a, like, living kitchen. So I guess I'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow, or because today's a Friday, after the weekend, and we will take a look at the yarn and see what else we'll do to it. Let's take a look at our snow-dyed superwash yarn. This is so cool looking. Ooh, we've got lots of speckles in there, which is pretty amazing given that we started completely with no acid in here. But that is looking really cool. But you can also see something super clearly. When I go and remove one of the skeins, what you can see is that we got very little color on one side of the yarn, and even on the side where we got color, it did not go through very far, which is fine. I'm not seeing a ton of the pistachio color either, but I'm seeing some pretty greens and browns and then some teals. And so what we're gonna do is we're actually going to over dye this using some pistachio dye. So let's go mix that up. I put on my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves and measured out 1.5 grams of the pistachio dye. And then I dissolved it in hot tap water, and while I'm stirring, a little bit splashed out. That's okay. Not a big deal, not a concern. I just want all the dye dissolved, and the total volume doesn't matter because we're gonna apply this all over our snow dyed yarn. I have my 12-quart pot right here. And just for curiosity's sake, let's take this yarn and dunk it in right now. The water is cold, there's no acid in here, but I was curious if you were gonna see any of the color come out, and I'm not seeing that really right now. Now, of course, there is a possibility that we could get some back staining, where when we apply heat, some of the color will come out. Maybe there's a little bit of color in there, but most of the color is in our yarn. My tap water is slightly acidic, and so, oh my gosh, I just spilled that all over. Okay. Thankfully, it's all over my protected work surface, but you can see little bits of that pistachio dye everywhere. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this, pop it in to that container. A little bit got onto the yarn. I'm gonna take my yarn mop that I used for another video, which I will tell you more about in a second, and bring this over to soak up the dye. So thankfully, I have something on hand, because you know how I regretted not using a yarn mop in this video so far? Well, I decided to redo this project on non-superwash yarn, and that time I used a yarn mop, and then there wasn't a ton of color. I will continue to soak up and clean up that color. Oh my goodness. So now I really don't have an accurate feel of how much dye is in this container. What I can see is that it looked like there were some bluish specks in here that hadn't dissolved immediately, which is fine. It's fine if we end up with some little specks. But now let's take our yarn and add it in cold. Ooh. That color is pretty. Now, we maybe don't have 1.5 grams, maybe we have 1 gram, so like a 0.5% depth of shade of this color, but I think it's really showing the color off in a beautiful, beautiful way. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I spilled. All right, let's bring over some acid. Oh, and I don't even know if I said, but I filled the pot like 1/3 full. Let's go ahead and add 1, 2, 3.5 tablespoons of white vinegar. Now, I believe that pistachio is one of the pre-metallized dyes, yes. And so it's possible that it's a color that breaks and may stick unevenly because it might strike fast, I believe, but I could be wrong. I think I will add more acid eventually, but I'm gonna go take this to the stove and let it start heating up. And I'm going to continue to clean up that leftover dye, but in the meantime, I may as well give you a peek at this video, which looks very, very similar to where we started, right? But that just started for the exact same colors on our non-superwash yarn. But the spill may have actually solved a problem and ended up with me getting more coverage on the yarn mop, which I was wanting. So, oh, it's the dye is underneath the box. And that's why I couldn't get it. I was like, where is the dye? Okay. I will go and continue to clean that and clean everything up. And I'll see you when our dye bath is warm. Our dye bath is warm. And let's peek and see. Oh, it's looking pretty clear. I want to leave it in the yarn in for a little longer, and I'm going to add a little bit more acid. I'm going to add another 4 tablespoons of white vinegar, and I'm going to let this heat for 15 minutes. It's already had at least 10-15 minutes of heat, but I had a timer going for something else, and so a little bit more time should be fine. Okay, let's remove Lene's yarn. Ooh, this pistachio color, even with the spill, is just sort of spot on pistachio, like pudding or something. Super pretty, and I'm gonna go set this aside to cool completely so we can wash it. Let's wash our yarn. And I will admit it's a couple days later, but I am so happy with this color. Oh my gosh. Now, I've had some time to think, and I think that for snow dyeing, where like I think that the drips happen in a more uniform way with a little bit less pressure. Because I think that as it melts, it sort of just sinks into the fiber. I think when you do ice dyeing, because as you get melt, it sort of goes over the surface of the ice and then forms a path. I don't know. I don't know how it ends up being different. I'm just thinking about it. But as I said, I did try this on non-superwash yarn to see if we get more coverage, because and I haven't gone back and looked at the results of when I've done snow dyeing with Kool-Aid on yarn, and I've done it on soft blanks and a bunch of things. And the results just haven't been my favorite. But I have loved the results of ice dyeing on fabric, on cotton t-shirts. And so, yeah, I think that, but even on soft blanks, which are fabric light, the colors strike so fast that we don't get the same amount of breaking as we might get and spread as we might get on cotton with fiber reactive dyes. But I have done snow dyeing on a t-shirt, and I'm waiting on those results, and those will, who knows, by the time those come out, it'll probably be summer. But anyway, we have no color bleeding here. I'm going to pop the yarn into my spin dryer to remove excess liquid, and then hang up the yarn to dry so we can have some conclusions. I really hope that you all aren't too mad at me for taking the snow dyed yarn and then turning it into something that I like a lot more. Because sometimes the hard thing is like when the experimentalist in me is pitted against the artist in me. And I adore this yarn. I like the patchiness and pops of the other colors with the pistachio base so much more than I liked it when the base was mostly white. I'll have to let you wait and see how this similar technique turned out when I tried this on some non-superwash yarn. But I think that, without giving spoilers there, I think if I was going to do a snow dyeing technique on this same yarn base again, I might aim for colors that are more pigmented. Pistachio is more of a pastel. Moss is in the medium of the road, similar with Sea Spray. Pecan is very pigmented, but I didn't use that much of it. And so I think picking colors like fluorescent fuchsia, Caribbean blue, emerald green that are known spreaders may help work more in our favor when it seems like the colors are striking too quickly onto the yarn. Another thing that could work more in our favor is using a bigger quantity of snow, or starting at least with some water down below, so that way there's more of an opportunity for the colors to spread than it might be if, you know, the color drips into the yarn and there's really nowhere for it to go because it's just damp and it gets locked in place. And you know what? There are some techniques that work better on fabric than they do on yarn, and that's totally okay. It is not a problem at all. I think that the results of this technique on a cotton t-shirt are incredible. You just have to use a different type of dye in order to do that. Lene, thank you so much for being my lab partner for today's episode of Dyepot Weekly. And happy birthday! I really hope that you've enjoyed this video about how I might pair pistachio with some other colors that aren't yellow. And I adore this combination and happily would play around with it more in different ways. But pistachio is such a stunning color. I don't know why I don't reach for it more often. It's a tricky color because it had those blue specks that didn't dissolve very fast. And so it's one that is slightly more temperamental, but sometimes getting those surprise speckles in the end is a fun effect as well. And so I love the yarn that I got. Now, if you want to become a lab partner like Lene, go and check out the listings in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. I can't guarantee that your video will come out around any particular date, but if you have a birthday or something, let me know months in advance and we can try to make something work, if my scheduling will allow it. Lene, thank you again for being my lab partner. You know, this image right here is one reason why sometimes I will share multiple different pictures of yarn in a listing in my shop, because this side looks very different from that one, right? I also try really, really hard to include flat lays of the yarn as it was dyed, because sometimes when it's twisted, you can't really tell, okay, how much of those other colors are in here. And it's easier to tell when you can see the yarn more as it was dyed. Now, of course, I guess I'm a little unique because I include the video title and I film just about every dyeing project I do. So my customers could literally go watch me create the yarn before going and purchasing the yarn. So getting a feel of all the character in the yarn itself, but also exactly how it was made. So you can check out the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop for tons of listings. But anyway, I am so happy with how this one turned out. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Thank you so much for watching.